He knows me by first name.
All right.
I gotta go back today.
If it falls down, it falls down. I'll edit this part out.
Edit out.
I'll edit the part out where it fell down and did all these other things. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Genesis 1 through 11. And the name of this section has a special name in the Bible. It's called the Primordial History. So this is the part of the Bible that exists kind of before we start to get into characters like Abraham, where we start to get into nations that have recognizable names that we now have some sort of historical continuity with. And it really is focused in on the beginnings. The Old Testament is written in two languages. It's written in Hebrew and it's written in Aramaic. Now, I'm going to be honest, 98% of the Old Testament is written in Hebrew. If you don't know what Hebrew looks like, that's what Hebrew looks like. And it does not move like our language from left to right. It moves from right to left. This is the way most Semitic languages are. Arabic, which is a much newer, and let me make that clear, a much newer Semitic language also reads from right to left, which can be a bit confusing, let me tell you, when you're studying the language. And so what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to develop, even in the course of this class, a mindset to understand Scripture the same way early Hebrew readers would, okay? Early Hebrew readers who are being exposed to the same sort of realities and difficulties that we are. By the way, we're constantly surrounded by all of these voices that are trying to tell us what truth is and how the world works and how things are. So were the early Hebrews. They were surrounded by all of these nations.
Here, that's right. Keep going.
That should take care of that.
It's so good.
It's that candle.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. Hey, look at this, guys. If you're watching on the video, oh, it just reoriented. Let's see. Better. Wow, tripod. Nobody buy that tripod. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to learn a little bit of Hebrew. And so we're going to learn a prayer that in Hebrew or in a synagogue or any place you would say usually before you do almost anything. So you're going to repeat after me and you're going to learn a little Hebrew, and I'll tell you what each one of the words means. So I want you to say Baruch.
Baruch.
Good. Baruch means blessed. Blessed. Baruch.
Baruch.
Atah.
Atah.
That means you. Blessed are you. Okay? Baruch.
Baruch.
Atah.
Atah.
Adonai.
Adonai.
Eloheinu.
Elohim.
So, Baruch means blessed. Atah are you. Adonai, you guys recognize that word? We say it a lot. Adonai. Come on in, Brandon. Guys, this is Brandon. He's going to be helping us do some stuff too. He's rolling in hot. He got in on a plane last night in the very early morning from a conference he was doing. We're learning Hebrew.
Nice, good.
I know, you thought you're taking the second Hebrew lesson. So Adonai means Lord. Eloheinu literally means our God. So Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu. Blessed are you, Lord, our God. And then we just have two more words. Melech. Can you say Melech?
Melech.
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 Ha'olam.
Ha'olam.
And Melech means king. And Ha'olam is a beautiful, beautiful word that means forever. So, king forever. This is the way. So we're going to try. So repeat after me, word for word. And then eventually you guys are going to get this just like this. So Baruch.
Baruch.
Atah.
Atah.
Adonai.
Adonai.
Eloheinu.
Elohim.
Melech.
Melech.
Ha'olam.
Ha'olam.
And that's how you would start almost every worship service that you have, or every scripture reading, or everything like this. That's the little thing. And then you might add in something like we have, like a collect or something of that nature. So, everybody, if you have a Bible, open it up to Genesis chapter 1. Now, we were already talking a little bit this morning before. We had some early birds come in, and we were talking already about the kind of questions that Genesis 1 elicits for us in our modern culture, right? And some of those big questions are like, doesn't science completely and totally disagree with the account that's being given here? Is the world really X amount years old? Is this really how things happen? What do we do with something like evolution? The theory of evolution, or the theory of natural selection, or all of these other things. But what I'm going to press us, and we're going to talk about some of these questions. Hey, Jenna, come on in. Good. No problem. You're not. You are a little. I'll give you that. So here's what we're going to do. We're not necessarily going to answer those questions till we've answered the question, one, what does this text actually focus on? And what does it care about? And what does it want the readers, those people to whom this is being communicated to, which is the people of God, both Jewish people of God, and then both us as grafted into this people. What does it want to communicate to us about the nature of the universe, of God, and all these other things? Sometimes these things will answer their questions, but the biggest thing is, here's what I want to hear from you. What kind of book is this? It's a sacred book, right? That's true. But if you were to describe it, where do you put this book in it? You know what I mean? Like the Dewey Decimal System, I think that's gone out of hand. Like, where would you place a book like the Bible if you had to sort it with other books?
A reference book, you mean?
Maybe. No, okay. There's one option, right? Like a reference book. You could put it like a hymnal or like a dictionary, right? Like those have a special place in the library, right? What are other places? History? Okay, you go in and you've got fiction books, you've got history books, you've got historical fiction, you've got all these other things. And then history is sometimes written differently than reference books, isn't it? Like, do reference books usually tell a story?
No.
What do they do?
Facts.
Ooh.
What? Somebody said something big there. Facts. Well, no, information, right? They're organized to get you data or information in a certain way, right? That's usually what a reference book. So you look up a dictionary, it's not based on a story, it's based alphabetically, so you can find the words you're looking for. And if you ever tried to read, like pick up the dictionary and read a story to your kid, that's ludicrous, right? History, similar. What other place could it be put?
Storybook.
Stories. So there are stories, whether they're historical or not. We have real and abiding stories that have movement and character, right? What other things are present in the Bible? Poetry. So I mean, and when you go to a library, they're in all these different sections. You go pick up a book by Robert Frost, which is not next to a book about the history of World War II, which is not next to a dictionary. What's incredible about the nature of the Bible is it appears to have all of these different things mixed in it simultaneously, and yet it was written during a period of time before all of these genres existed. Did you realize that? So here's what I want to ask us to do. Is Genesis chapter 1, is it the first chapter of a science textbook or reference book? Is it designed to be that? Have you read a science book or a textbook? Yeah, they also do not have any movement in terms of story, characters. It is an organized presentation of information, observed information about realities. So, in many cases, what they do is, or try to do, or should do, is they note that this book is limited. You see, science is primarily a discipline of observation. So what does that mean about statements that scientists make about things that they have not observed? Like, for instance, the creation. Was anybody sitting around with an iPad saying, hey man, you never guess what's about to happen. Everything's going to be created. We should record this. The answer to the question is no. And here's the problem as I talk to you about worldview. We live in a world that, even though I will say this worldview has probably been shaken significantly over the past 50 to 100 years. We used to think about science as being the bedrock on which reality existed and our understanding. The reality is, from a philosophical, and by the way, I've got degrees in biology and chemistry and philosophy. So we used to think that the bedrock of how we understand the universe was centered completely on observable facts and the patterns and the other things that we do. And we used to feel pretty good about that. I would say that in our modern, we have become a little more skeptical of science's ability to fully describe. The reality is when I was mapping the human genome and the genome of Mycobacterium avium and tuberculosis, we were not doing it with a level of certainty. We were doing it with a level of statistical significance. Do you guys know what that means? It means if I'm a researcher, if I can get something to happen a certain number of times, it's called significantly statistical. And then I can say this, and you do that with drugs or with other things like, hey, we use this drug. In 20% of the cases, people recovered faster. Out in the world, we think that, oh, we did research on that. I take that drug, I'm going to get better. No, that's not what we're saying. We don't have the capacity to say, why not? As I mentioned earlier, the human body is way too complex. We just don't know in every circumstance how everything's going to function. Why? Because you guys in this room are the most complex thing in this room. You're more complex than that iPhone that I keep dropping. You're more complex than these televisions. You're more complex than anything that exists. So much so that we cannot fabricate you. We don't know how to do that. We can teach things, we can teach AI to think about things and sort information, but we have yet to be able to produce, except through a man and a woman coming together and having a baby, to produce the level of complexity that all of you represent. So what I want us to do for a moment is say, when we read this, let's lay down for a second the sort of mindset that we take as we come to the first chapter and say, oh, this is a science textbook about, no, it's something far different. And I'm going to say to you guys, this, as the whole Bible is primarily concerned with making a statement about God and his relationship with people. And we have to look at it first and foremost through that lens. So people say, well, you disagree with scientists. I will always disagree with anyone who says that God did not create. And you'll know why. Because I think that is the bedrock of what this is ultimately turned. Now, you want to argue about the details? I don't think these folks are concerned about the details. I think they're concerned about the main thing, which is that, and we're going to talk about the two main things that they're trying to communicate here. But what we're going to do first is we're going to read a little bit of this scripture and dig right in. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening, and there was morning the second day. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed and fruit, trees bearing fruit in which their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and tree bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate day from night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and for years. And let them be lights in the expanse of heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give life on earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply over all the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning on the fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, creeping things, beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to their kind. And God saw it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image and our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish. And God said, behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of heaven, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Okay. Have we heard that story before? Right, we've heard that story before. Vicky, what do you got?
Because there was nobody around to observe this, where and how did this interpretation and story come to be? Who created this story? And, supposing that they knew what God thought to write it down.
And this is why this is a theological reality. And the bedrock of this theological reality in this debate is that we serve a God who chooses to reveal himself. The only place that we could get that is from a revelation from God given to humanity.
To prophets who came up with this explanation.
And in some cases, in this book, even though I will tell you, so the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, they're oftentimes called the Torah. Torah means teaching or law of Moses. And so, but does it ever say that in the Bible, that the first 5 books were given to Moses? Well, Moses was dead before the end. But what we do know is the tradition and the reality that we're told again and again. We serve a God who chooses to make himself known. And he makes himself known to people. And it doesn't say he shuts them off. He says, no, I speak. I give words to people. I don't shut them down. I don't turn them into robots. That allows them to express the uniqueness of who I am and the uniqueness of my relationship with humanity. So this is gonna, if you hear anything today, I want you to focus on is what she just said is what sets this apart from other traditions. So what stories were Jewish people hearing, Hebrews hearing when this was written? By the way, this was probably written anywhere between 3000 BCE and probably 1500 BCE. We don't know. We just know we have manuscripts that are from much later, that this had been taken and copied and kept and put together into this Torah a very, very long time ago. But the question is, what kind of stories were they reading during this time? Like, for instance, a lot of people like to say, oh, well, they're just like the Egyptians, and they're just like the Babylonians. Their stories are exactly the same. And here's what I want you to do, and I really do. I want you to go read the creation stories from the Egyptians and from the Babylonians. And here's what you'll find. You'll find that in most cases, those stories are about multiple gods who look a lot like us humans, who actually look a lot like the kings that they had during the day, who were fighting with one another. In the Babylonian account, which is called the Enuma Elish, it was found actually in the 1920s in an archaeological dig. In that one, basically, you've got this god Tiamat and this god Anaf, who are in a fist fight for control of the universe. And eventually, after they struggled and they punched Tiamat, who, by the way, is represented by a sort of dragon, a giant sea beast. Once he's conquered them, he takes control, and then he makes other little gods. And these little gods are associated with things, much like you guys are familiar with Greek and Roman mythology, right? Like you've got a god of lightning and you've got a god of the harvest. And so they're associated with all of these different things. And then what do? They squabble. They get into, and you ask yourself, like, and guess what? All the evil in the world, you know where it comes from? Gods who are fighting with each other. All the bad stuff that happens. So you got, all your crops got wiped out. Oh my gosh. They were fighting over this stuff. Well, but who suffers for it? The people, right? Well, if you read where people came from, people came because the main gods got angry at how noisy the little gods were being, and they stepped down and they started murdering them. And so from their blood and from their broken flesh start pop forth humanity. And guess what? They were just as noisy. And they were just as horrible. But they were an object of one. They could be devoted to these gods, but they could also be a place that the gods could take out their pettiness, right? This is the nature of the Godhead that was given. It was this understanding of gods were these things that they do slightly better than chaos. And that if I hold my mouth the right way, and if I give enough, they might bless me and do something for me. Now, I want you to connect that to the story that we're given in the Bible. We're going to be given a very different story, and I'm not going to skip ahead. We're going to be given the story of a holy and a righteous God who gives good things, and a people who rebel and do bad things. And yet, who is ultimately going to suffer so that those people will have life? God will. And that's the story we're going to see from first to last as we look at this. But I want us to notice some things about this first chapter that set it apart from all this. How many gods do we have introduced in this passage? One. Already, guys, this is like, people would read this story like, that can't be right. What do you mean only one? And I want to tell you something, that everything about even the grammar of this passage is incredible. So these are the first three words of the Hebrew Bible. Barashit, bara, Elohim. And in the beginning, that's just this. In Hebrew, you join words together. This is in the Reshit. Means it's the word for Rosh, head, start. When you talk about head, start, that's the way in Hebrew they describe this whole thing. The first word of the Hebrew Bible is in the start, in the beginning. And so that is what we get. And it doesn't give any precursor, it doesn't tell you anything. But then the second word, we got a timeout.
Quick timeout. I just call it timeout. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Do you have the words to the songs on your computer so I can print them? The bulb broke on the projector.
You are kidding me.
I don't call timeouts for nothing, man.
I have the words on my music stand for all the songs. Thank you. That is straight crazy. Wow.
Have an extra bulb.
Wow. Man, it's going to be a great day, people.
That bulb is
So-
expensive.
Uh,
But when you need it, you need it.
You need it. When you need it, you definitely need it. And we need it. So here's what we're going to do. And I want us to notice a few things because I'm going to have to make some comments and then we're going to dig deeper. So this term, bara, what's interesting is, do you create things? Have you ever created anything in English? You ever said, hey, I created that. I did that. We say that all the time. Guess what? Not in Hebrew. In Hebrew, there's one word, and the subject of that word is always God, and it is bara. God is the only one that does this thing. Now, we do lots of things. We make stuff. That's asad. We form things. We do artsy things. We build stuff. And by the way, God does all those things too. And that's how we mirror him. But what's really cool about the grammar of Hebrew is only God baras. You know another cool place where this is used? Create in me a clean heart, O Lord. It's bara. Only God can create. And when he creates, it's new. It's a new thing. That's really incredible. This sets God apart. Already, just in the grammar that they used in Hebrew, they have set their God as different from all these other gods. Now, here's the name of God that we're going to be introduced to, Elohim. You guys heard that term before, Elohim? We used it, Eloheinu. We said it in our opening prayer. Okay, Elohim. Now, here's what's really weird about this term. Is when you look at it, it looks plural. Whenever you got an eem, you know, in English, if you add an S to the end of something, like I don't say Lamar, I don't say Lamars. Lamars. There's many Lamars. If there were 8 Lamars, I would say all the Lamars are here, right? Like that's plural.
You better write a book.
So yes, right. But right here, this ending on God, which could also be written El, that's another name for God. And you've heard things like El Shaddai, El Rapha, all of these different terms, okay? But this, if you were to translate this in a lot of ways, you would say God's. God's created. But here's what's interesting. You say, well, it's plural, but it's actually singular. So it looks plural, but it's singular. And you say, how do I know that? I know that because of the verb. This verb is singular. In Hebrew, you conjugate verbs based on whether the subject is plural or singular. This is the verb for singular. And this is the way Elohim is used. Now, when it's talking about foreign gods, it'll talk about gods. And it's the only word they've got. So they'll say Elohims. But when the Hebrew people use it to reference their God, it is plural in form, but singular in reality. Does that sound like anything to you guys?
Yeah, it's the Holy Spirit, God that He's turned.
Did anybody also notice that when we were talking about that first day, in the beginning, God created Barashit, Bara Eloheinu, Hashamayim v'ha'aretz, the heavens and the earth. Did you notice that it talked about this void that existed and what was hovering over the void? The Ruach Elohim. Ruach means breath or wind. Ruach in Hebrew is also the term that is always used to describe the Spirit of God. And when we're talking about the Holy Spirit, it'll say Ruach Kadosh. the Spirit of holiness, the Holy Spirit of God. Then did you notice at the end, maybe you misread, he's standing around and God says, hey, we've made all these living creatures. Let us make man. And that term is not saying a man, it's saying man, humanity. The term is Adam. You guys know what? Adam. You guys familiar with that word? Adamah is earth. The earth, right? Land, dirt. What is Adam made out of? Dirt. He's made out of the components. By the way, even though this isn't scientific, it's already told you that we exist based on the constituent elements that already exist in and around us. I have carbon in me, just like that tree does out there, just like that dirt. I have minerals in me, just like that dirt. And yet I'm different. Correct? And so, but he looks around and God says, let us make man in our own image. Plural. What is going on there? Did they just copy that wrong? By the way, I don't want to point this out, but we have another passage that starts just like this in the Gospel of John. And by the way, this is translated into Greek, and that term would then be in arche. Actually, it's that. In arche. When the Old Testament is translated into Greek, you know what it starts with? In arche, in the beginning, the same words. And it says the Word was God and the Word was with God in creation. So what do we see here? One, it can be one of two things. Jewish people would say, when God says, let us create man in our own image, what he is saying, they would say that he's talking about the divine council, the community of angels that exist around him that he has already created, that are his emissaries that work for him, that do his bidding. We can agree with that because we know he created all things in heaven and on earth. We know that. But what do we also know? We also have the benefit of the New Testament that says, and it says this again and again, Jesus was there, as was the Holy Spirit, active in creation. And so that doesn't surprise us when we hear God say, let us create man in our own image. Jesus is a reflection of the first Adam. And by the way, we're not going to have time to do this or go into Hebrews, but that's the reality. And we might have to take 2 weeks on this first passage because there's too much stuff. So, already this is unique. And what's unique? Here's what's unique. Does he need other people? Who's fighting against God in this process? Here's another thing, and this is what we have to talk about. The thing that's being presented in Genesis chapter 1 is that the Hebrew God, the God of the Bible, is sovereign. He has no rival. You remember I told you about dragon, Tiamat? That they had to fight it out to win, to be able to create? By the way, the same term is used in one of the days to describe the sea creatures, the Leviathan. And I want you to notice how funny it is. What is God's relationship to the Leviathan, the biggest sea beast you can ever imagine? He plucks him up and he creates him, puts him in the water, pats him on the head. He's in control. Also, did you guys notice anything strange about the ordering of creation? When do we get the sun and the moon? Day 4. You're telling me we got plants and everything else before we got? Well, how did they get light? Did we already have light?
God, he was the light.
Day 1. And where's the light coming from? God. Or the light is God. And you see this process. This is what's so incredible about this whole thing. People talk about time. How long were these days? Guys, it's not till day 4. Do you guys know how we measure time? Is time the same here as it is on Mars? No. If we go, We could go to some planets, if we could survive on those planets, and we could be like 800 years old. Based on how quickly they move around the sun, our entire understanding of time is relative, and it is built on the distance that we exist from the luminaries. The sun that governs the day, and the moon that governs the night. So here's what I'm telling you. The concept of time, and it names it in this, isn't even invented until the fourth day. You guys hear that? Otherwise, what do we have to measure? God's presence is all we have to measure light and darkness. And he makes it light. Now, did you notice anything else weird about the days? Evening and morning. Isn't that a weird way to say that? Do we normally, I think about a day from morning to evening. Isn't that generally how everybody does? Why do you think they do it differently? But it's weird. We can all agree, marking a day from evening to morning is a strange thing. But I want us to look at the movement. What happens in the evening? The sun goes down, rest. What happens in the morning? The light pops up, and we have it. By the way, the whole movement of this is moving not on a cycle from light to darkness. We like to start in the morning, light comes up, and ends with darkness. God has inverted the entire equation. And he says, I start working in the dark, and I'm always moving things towards the morning, the light. And we live in that light. That is the beauty. And by the way, even to this day, I bet Vicky could tell you, when were they headed over to the synagogue? Sundown Friday, right? Sundown is when Sabbath begins. Our day moves from sundown to sundown. And that's how they measured Sabbath. So Friday night, the sun went down, you were going to go into the synagogue and worship. And then when Saturday the sun went down, Sabbath's over. We're on to the next day. This is a reversal of how we see and understand the realities around us. So, those are some, but here's the other thing. So, sovereign. God is not fighting with anybody. He's in charge. He's putting things, and how is he making things? Is he fighting? He's speaking them. He's literally saying them out loud, and they become real. Does that show you he has power? Power beyond what we can imagine. But here's the other thing, and these are the two things that this does. All of these other stories that I told you from Egypt and from Babylon is one, which you can already see, is their gods are not sovereign. They are not powerful. They have very, very much limited power and ability. But here's the other thing. Their gods are also not personal. This is a story of a God who is both transcendent, more powerful and bigger than anything you can possibly imagine, and is also immanent. He is completely present with you. You're going to see a movement where God, it says, God stoops down. He enters into a conversation of his own desire and will to have relationship. He creates not out of a need for worship. He's sovereign. He creates because he is reflecting the relationship that has always existed within him. He is manifesting love out of the choice of his own free will to produce people in life. And not just people that he's just going to throw out there and use as target practice when he's doing big God things, but people that are going to manifest, people that are going to be built in the very image of God. They're going to reflect his light out in the world. Now that's an incredible reality. Now here's what we're going to do. Quick application. No, I got to go and pray and then I could go help lead worship and then figure out how we're going to get around the fact that we have absolutely no words for any of these songs. My man Brandon, every time we want to ask a big question about how do we respond, because this is a big deal, a thing that's being revealed in this passage about the nature of God. What do we do with that in our lives? And then we want to have Miss Ann make sure we're praying for each other. And so that card I gave you, if you have any questions, write them down. Also, if you have any prayer requests, ways throughout the week that we can be praying for you, write them down and make sure Miss Ann gets them, and she'll be ending us up in prayer in just a few minutes. So guys, I promise you we'll tighten this party up. We'll have a few more people in next week. I hope the video I just did worked. I better stop that, otherwise who knows what will happen. But thank you guys for being here the first time doing this. I appreciate
And
it.
do we thank Percy for leading us today?
All right, so I want to give just a few application thoughts based on what Percy has shared.